Hello YouTube, and welcome to another Elder Scrolls lore video in my series People of the Elder Scrolls, where we take one person from the Elder Scrolls universe and tell their story. Today we're talking about one of the main characters of the Dawnguard questline, Serana, who is your companion throughout most of the questline. Now, before we begin, two things. One, for years now I have used a mod for Serana's appearance, the Serana mod. I thought it looked really cool at the time and I installed it, and I've been very happy with it for many years, even bringing it to Skyrim Special Edition. But when I wanted to deinstall it for this video, it caused graphical glitches in Serana's model, even on a new save and after a reinstall. I've never had this problem, I've deinstalled it multiple times in the past, but for some reason it just glitches my game now, and I don't really have time at the moment of this recording to get another PC. So in this video I will be using her modded appearance for my own screenshots. This is what she looks like in vanilla Skyrim, for those of you who haven't seen it for some reason. Credit for this image goes to UESP. But in the videos we'll be using her modded appearance on my PC, because that's where I shoot my screenshots, supplemented with some fan art for which the appropriate credits will appear on the screen, of course. Now the second thing, I realize we have already passed the 25,000 subscriber milestone, and thank you all so much for that. I want you all to know that a 25,000 subscriber special is launching coming Monday, so you can look forward to that. With that said, let's talk about Serana. Skyrim has few characters that are almost so universally loved as Serana. While not everybody likes her, I admit, she's a pretty strong contender for overall favorite character in the game for a lot of people. Her story begins back in the Second Era, likely shortly after or during the events of the Elder Scrolls Online. Back in these days, a king of sorts ruled the area of northwestern Hafingar. His name was King Harkon. According to his own words, he was a mighty Nordic king back then, with a vast domain and endless riches, with infinite power. Whether this is accurate is quite questionable, as we don't have any historical records of this, but we also don't have any direct historical records disproving his claims either, and we have Serana backing his story up by saying that he was at least quite powerful. So likely he was a king over a relatively small and secluded territory in the northwestern part of Skyrim, where he had nearly absolute power. He and his queen Valerica led a relatively secluded life as rulers, since they were away from their kingdom, on an island off the coast. On this island stood a large castle that was apparently much older than Harkon's kingdom or Harkon himself, and he used this castle, Castle Volkihar, as his seat of power. Over the course of their reign, the couple bore a child, a little Nordic girl with pitch black hair. They named this little princess Serana, and the family led a pretty happy life on the island. Little Serana grew up in a pretty lonely environment. Her parents were always busy with their own affairs, especially her father. This caused her for having problems getting along with her father from a very young age, something that we see worsening later on. Her childhood was marked with loneliness. Whenever she spent time with one of her parents, it would mostly be with her mother. She and her mother used to tend the garden together, practicing alchemy, and her mother would teach her a few things about magic. This caused her to prefer her mother over her father to a great degree during her childhood, and in her own words she would come to see her mother as the person she most trusted and basically her only friend. But even though she spent quite some time with her mother, she would spend most of her time alone. She was rarely allowed to come with her parents when they would leave the island, and thus she spent most of her childhood just exploring the castle and the island. As a little girl, she said that she loved exploring and that she poked around every corner of the castle until she knew every nook and cranny within. That isn't to say that she kind of liked this lifestyle, as she states that she felt really lonely most of the time and that she would have loved to have some company or some friends as a kid. But even if the family had its issues, back then they were relatively normal and things went relatively well. However, as time progressed, Serana and her family grew older and things worsened. Lord Harkon specifically became obsessed with his own death and became afraid for his own life as he got older. He searched for methods to extend his life and eventually arrived at the conclusion that vampirism would be the only way for him to live and rule indefinitely. But he detested vampires and saw their condition as a disease, so he searched for another way, and he found that it was possible to become a pureblood vampire as a worshipper to Molag Bal. But for this gift of pureblood vampirism, Molag Bal demanded a price. In order to please the Daedric prince, Harkon sacrificed thousands of innocents in the kingdom and offered his wife and daughter to the prince for a ritual, which was in fact just them being raped by the Daedric prince. In exchange, his wife and daughter would become daughters of Cold Harbor, pure-blood vampires. Most women don't survive this ritual, but Serana and Valerica both survived in a miracle and became pure-blood vampires, or daughters of Cold Harbor. This gift, so to speak, was then also passed down to Harkon, who had now fulfilled his goals and had become a pure-blood vampire, able to live on forever, if he so wished. Serana and Valerica, after the fact, always considered it to be an honor to be involved in the ritual, but when pushed, Valerica will tell you that it was merely expected of them to go along with it and just endure the process. In addition to that, Serana appears to have been emotionally scarred due to the ritual, as we can notice in Skyrim. As vampires, the situation of their family did not grow much for the better. For quite some years, everything seemed well, and things continued as they had for actually several centuries. Serana and her mother would tend to the garden, practice alchemy, and their mother would work on the moon dial in the garden with the help of some elven artisans. But then, as if out of nowhere, everything changed suddenly, because Lord Harkon had gotten annoyed with the fact that as vampires they had to endure the weakness that they had while the sun was out. This resulted in him finding a prophecy. This prophecy said that one day a dreadlord would rise who would blot out the sun and allow vampires and other children of darkness to live during the day. The finding of this prophecy changed the family. Harkon would become obsessed by it and do everything in its power to find out how to carry out the prophecy. Meanwhile, his wife Valerica grew distant to him, as she thought that executing the prophecy would invite a war with all of Tamriel's living beings. She would then start to work against Harkon in secret and would become almost as obsessed with his failure as he was with the success of the prophecy. This left Serana trapped in the middle of her two parents, as her parents became ever more distant to her and she grew ever lonelier. She would sometimes still spend time with her mother, but most of these times her mother would simply try to turn her against her father and try to get Serana on her side by feeding her negative things about Harkon. She would start to dread her situation in the castle, until one day at the end of the Second Era, her mother would come and get her in the night, saying that they needed to get away from her father. They stole the two Elder Scrolls that her father had collected for his prophecy and disappeared into the night. Her mother then sealed her away in the place that we know as Dim Hollow Crypt. For Serana then, everything went quickly, and she wasn't sure what to think or what to feel, but at the time she trusted her mother in her judgment. Valerica would then trap herself in the Soul Cairn away from Harkon while Serana was sealed away, leaving both of them out of Harkon's reach for centuries. But then in the Fourth Era, during the Dawnguard questline, the player awakened Serana after the vampires in service to her Lord Harkon almost found her. She is then returned to her father after she and the player travel back to Castle Volkihar. Then, depending on whether the player decides to join the vampires or remain with the Dawnguard, Serana will assist them while working either with or against her father. In the vampire questline, you first work with her father until she realizes her mother was right and blotting out the sun will invite a war with all of Tamriel, which will result in you two still working against her father after she convinces you that, well, her father will basically kill you after he's done because you are too strong for him to let you live. The missions on both sides of the questlines are mostly the same, but over the course of their journeys, Serana starts to realize that both her mother and father merely tried to use her for their own goals, and starts to resent both. In the end, she can optionally forgive her mother, but ends up killing her father with the player regardless of which questline you choose. As a character, Serana is pretty level-headed and seems to be the only one in her family not affected mentally by the prophecy. Personality-wise, she's kind and caring, but can also be quite cynical if the player says something dumb or decides to be a dick to her in the dialogue options. Especially in the beginning, she is slow to trust the player and is often a bit cynical, but over the course of their journey she will grow to them and the two can develop a lasting friendship, depending on what dialogue options you choose. Now, something else that's interesting about her character is that she does not see her vampirism as a disease or an affliction. Especially when you first meet her, she's pretty happy with it and sees it offensive if you ask her if she wants a cure. She sees it as a gift that she earned through the ritual and she won't really diverge from this way of thinking if the vampire questline is chosen. However, when the Dawnguard side of the story is chosen, she will slowly start to resent her vampirism and blame the vampirism for everything that happened to her family. At the end of the Dawnguard questline, the player can then ask her if she wants to get cured, and with the right dialogue options she will go around and see Valian for a cure. After she is cured, she will state that for the first time in centuries she truly feels like if she's alive and feels like she can truly breathe again since her turning. And that's basically the backstory of Serana and her family. Not the most pleasant backstory, admittedly, but it made her one of Skyrim's more interesting characters in my opinion. I've been wanting to cover her for more than 2 years now. Unfortunately, I never really did, because she is heavily featured in one of my Elder Scrolls stories that I've written, and I did not actually want to accidentally, make up actual lore with my headcanon. But now that that story has been finished for some time, I felt like I should probably do it by now. That said, allow me to thank my top patrons before ending this video: Mr. Bernardo Binda, Mr. Metalloid1v1, Mr. Christmas, Mr. Gabriel Binda, Mr. Hayden Barnes and Mr. Para. These amazing people, along with the others on screen, make it so that I can continually work on my Elder Scrolls lore series weekly. That said, I hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, I hope you all stick around until the next one. Remember, the 25k subscriber special will probably air coming Monday, so put it on your calendars, and if that's not something for you, well, I'll see you in the next regular lore video next Thursday. Bye bye.